Hey all, so back for another Spotlight with Context. I haven't actually provided an intro to these in a while, so let me just reiterate. I do work at Kabam. I am a character designer there. I did not design Silk or Kindred, the other character this month, but as I was obviously part of their testing process, I make these videos to go over their abilities and try and give some extra context before they hit the contest. So, with that, we're going to go right into it because I know Silk has been very highly anticipated for a long time, and she's a ton of fun. So, I'm just going to touch over the base stats and abilities real quick. That is pretty darn solid health. So, she is a science character. They tend to have higher base stats. She's not tanky, but she does have a decent health pool to start with. So, that part is valuable. Her prestige isn't really anything spectacular. She's a pretty middling defender, but she is relatively easy to use for decent output. If you want competitive battlegrounds numbers out of her, then I would say she's a bit harder to use. But focusing just on the basics, I would say that Silk is actually extremely easy to use to get decent results out of. So I think 3.5 makes sense. And then she has some really solid damage. So just touching on a few of those attributes and moving on to strengths. So she has 2 hit mediums, so that is 7 hit combos if you're not using the heavy attack. But she has a very clean ability to chain her basics into heavy attacks. And when you combine this with canceling into specials or canceling into strikers, she has the ability to put up some very long combo strings. And this is useful in a lot of fights in general, but also synergizes really well with the rest of her kit. She has a really strong evade. We're going to go over some of the specifics of this ability because it is pretty unique later, but I will just say it is very powerful. And yeah, she doesn't dex, which means she doesn't get the buff. The buff just doesn't happen. It's not like she's buff immune, where it would still trigger punishments for buffs failing against neutralized defenders like Rintra or Wiccan. It just doesn't happen. So this is really solid against a number of Mystic defenders, means that she ignores Mystic Dispersion unless something is putting other buffs on her. Very powerful ability. Now, I talked about how you can get decent results out of her without too much trouble. But for the cool stuff you saw in the deep dive, for the things that you're going to be seeing from people in battlegrounds, potentially in war, she does need some runway. You need to stay very aggressive. You need to be hitting the opponent frequently and in rapid succession to get the most out of her. And so you kind of need to be prepared for that. And any matchup that is going to slow her down significantly is going to cause her some trouble. Now, she does have slow baked in. We'll talk about that right now. And that means that Evade and Unstoppable are less likely to slow her down. But there are a number of other things, power gain, miss, etc., that can definitely cause her problems. So watch out for those as you are learning her. Um, yeah, she's quite bad against anything that punishes you for hitting the opponent because she likes to hit the opponent a lot. So, pretty simple on that. And yeah, if somebody bypasses Evade, you can still use Silk, but her best defensive asset is immediately gone, so you are going to need to be more careful there. Starting with the general abilities, incoming ruptures and slows both last for a 90% shorter duration. A quick note on these kinds of duration reductions, they are additive, so if something else is boosting duration, if something else is boosting debuff duration, like say the debilitate node adding another 50 or 100%, then that would still take effect. But in general, a slow coming in is only going to last for a tenth of its normal duration. Same thing with a rupture. Cool ability that definitely helps out in places. And then this is the dexterity replacement. While dodging back, she cannot be struck. She doesn't benefit from the Dex Mastery at all, but she does crit more if you have higher ranks in it. Most people don't, but if you do, you still benefit. So let's spend some time talking about Silk Sense. She has a 100% chance to evade special attacks, and then it goes on cooldown. And it goes on cooldown either for 25 seconds or until the opponent is struck 20 times. So let's talk about that first line. What this means is obviously that you do have a 100% chance to evade special attacks, but this is if she would be hit. This ability is built to keep it from going on cooldown when it doesn't need to. And so if you're facing somebody like Cyclops and you can easily dex that special one every single time, it's one of the oldest ones in the book, that's not going to put your evade on cooldown. And that's really important because if you're facing somebody where, let's say that you're extremely comfortable with their special 1 evade, but their special 2 scares you, maybe Mangog or whatever, then this is going to help with that because you can manually evade the special that you feel safe with and then keep your safety net for the one that you think you might mess up. It's pretty comprehensively built to do that, but just know that like this evade should trigger only if you would actually get hit. If you stay on top of your evades, you can keep it in cooldown, keep the guardrails up for a very, very long time. But then once you use it, like it says, you either have to wait 25 seconds for it to come back, or you have to hit the opponent 20 times. And because Silk has 7 hit combos, that's just 3 combos. If you're facing a Mangog or something with an unblockable special 2, then you should probably be able to get 3 combos in for a character that doesn't have Mystic Dispersion before that next special 2 comes back. So, very, very powerful ability. This, like I said, is her main defensive trick, where if you can get around the basics, if you can get around the easy parts of the specials, you can just go full Jesus take the wheel every once in a while, and she will have your back. So, moving on to why you want to hit the opponent a lot. All of her attacks inflict this small physical vulnerability debuff for 1.2 seconds, so very short, up to a maximum of 50. But those debuffs are refreshed when the opponent is struck. That can be by Silk, that can be by a Striker. Both of those are going to refresh them. Strikers aren't going to apply new debuffs because those aren't Silk's attacks, but they will refresh them. And then they are removed when the opponent activates a special or is knocked down. So this is the aggressive part. You want those really long combos because if you stop and let your opponent throw a special, or if you cash out with your own special attack, these debuffs go away. So you're going to want to get comfortable backdrafting with her, or at least saving up your Striker Spirit and then doing a full 7-hit combo into a Striker, into another 7-hit combo. You don't necessarily have to master those highs to use her in questing content, like I said, but if you want to get good Battlegrounds kills with her, that's the kind of skill that you're going to need with her. You're going to want to backdraft. You're going to want to put a good relic with solid spirit gain on her and figure out these really long combo chains so that you can get big stacks of physical vulnerabilities. Because individually these are pretty small, but if you can get up to 20 or 30 of them, which is not unreasonable, she starts hitting really hard on those basics. So moving on to heavy attacks, when she charges her heavy attack, as long as the opponent is nearby and has any of her physical vulnerability debuffs, you can inflict a stun debuff. This allows her to chain in 2 heavies from combos like America Chavez or Wasp or Doom, but it is an actual debuff. This one is not a stun passive. You can do this at any point in the combo. You can even try and do this after the last medium. Do medium, light, 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 medium, and then charge your heavy. But I don't personally recommend that because that's probably giving the opponent time to either hit you in the face really quickly before that stun ticks up, or for them to dodge backwards out of striking distance and just not get stunned. Still, if you like living on the edge, it can work. Yeah, so this is going to give Silk really easy access to heavy attacks if she needs them for any nodes like that. It allows her to knock down the opponent more frequently. This has been a great ability ever since it came out on Wasp. It continues to be a great ability. The first actual hit of the heavy that lands grants her a Fury passive, and it's a pretty chunky one. This is based on a maxed out 6-star, but almost 3,000 attack is very good. It only lasts that same 1.2 seconds and can only go up to 3 stacks, but same as the physical vulnerabilities, this is refreshed under all of the same rules. Whenever the opponent is struck, this Fury gets refreshed, and it's removed whenever the opponent activates a special or is knocked down. So the way you're going to want to play Silk is you're going to want to start getting your physical vulnerabilities up with a nice long combo. You're going to want to pick your moment to chain into a heavy and then cancel that into a special attack so that you are magnifying your damage both with a bunch of physical vulnerabilities and with this Fury. And that's going to be your cash out moment, because eventually at the end of that string you're going to knock the opponent down, you're going to lose your Furies and your physical vulnerabilities, but the idea is to get enough going that it's worth it. Moving on to her special one, very simple cash out, burst of physical damage. This is obviously magnified by the physical vulnerabilities. It is also magnified by the Fury, and so often this number will be much, much bigger than you see even for this rarity. Special 2, you get a Sunder debuff so that your opponent can't benefit from crit resistance. That part's nice. And then it deals an even bigger burst of physical damage. There are also more hits in the Special 2, and so by the time it finishes, you should have, on average, more physical vulnerabilities than when you go for the Special 1, meaning that this burst is even bigger than it appears and is pretty darn close to double the burst for the Special 1. That's going to depend on if the opponent has any physical resistance themselves, so I don't want to say it is effectively double, but it's pretty darn close. Now, the Special 3 is her largest cash out because the Special 3 doesn't remove your physical vulnerabilities or your Furies. It doesn't count as knocking down the opponent for the purposes of those, meaning that you can cancel a heavy into a Special 3 and lock in one Fury for free. So that's going to allow you to get another one later. Because the Special 3 inflicts a stun passive, meaning immediately after it you can charge in, keep hitting the opponent, and keep refreshing those physical vulnerabilities you have up and that Fury you already got from it. This is going to allow you to continue to build your physical vulnerabilities by hitting your stunned opponent. You're going to gain power much more quickly. They're going to gain almost none. And then at the end of that stun, you are going to be able to chain into another heavy via your stun ability, get a second Fury, and then cancel that into a Special 1 because you'll have picked up enough power by then, and get an even bigger cash out. This is the way that Silk most dramatically finishes fights. I don't think it's actually going to be necessary all the time in Battlegrounds. I think building up to a big Special 2 is very often going to finish things for her. But if you want her absolute maximum, this is how you get it. And if there's any kind of reduced power cost or extra power gain in play, and you can go from a Special 3 into a Special 2 afterwards, then this is going to get nuts quickly. So, the signature ability, which I just absolutely adore this name for the signature ability. If you haven't read anything about Silk, this is coming from her solo run, which was a ton of fun. I read it earlier this year. But striking the opponent with a heavy attack or while their back is against the wall is going to inflict a slow debuff. So, either a heavy, which remember you can easily get up by just going medium heavy, because you'll have physical vulnerabilities up. That's going to get you a slow, or just hitting them when they're back against the wall, like, say, Rintra. You can do that before you get the heavy, which can be very important, because obviously Rintra can go stun immune. There are things at play there. But you get this 2-second slow debuff, and it's paused while Silk has a Fury passive, or just while they stay backed up. So as long as you're wailing on them in the wall, you basically have permanent slow. If you get this slow up from a heavy, and then you are able to chain into a special and get that Fury for the special, then you're going to keep this slow up for the duration of that as well. It's not truly a permanent slow, so keep in mind it does have some limitations. If you are unable to stun your opponent, if it's feeling like you can't get your heavies off, if it's feeling like you can't back them up, this can, fail to work for you. But it is a really powerful ability for ensuring that you can keep your aggro train going and keep building your physical vulnerabilities towards your cash outs on your special attacks and not worry about the opponent evading or going unstoppable during them. It's also very helpful for somebody like Thing. And now, while this slow is active, the opponent suffers dramatically reduced regeneration rate as long as Silk is attacking. So this by itself at Sig 200 can get into reversal, as you see, minus 150. But if you combo this with Despair, Despair itself has a ceiling of 100%. And so you can get this up to minus 250% regen rate. Most opponents, if you're in PvP settings like Battlegrounds or War, are going to be running Recovery, which is an extra 15, meaning that this ends up being more like a 135% reversal. But that's really, really strong. That means whatever regen that they were going to get, you multiply it by 4/3, and that's how much they lose. This can end up being extremely dramatic. If you are able to fight Rintra and line it up so that he does actually go unstoppable from being hit in the corner, there are ways to do that around your slow. I can't be prescriptive with it yet because I don't feel like I have it 100% down, but it will happen if you test it enough. Then Rintra tries to heal while he's unstoppable and you reverse this. That is incredible. Something a little bit less cheesy, if you just face anybody with regen, like say Absorbing Man, this becomes really, really strong. Just the fact that this allows you to reverse your opponent's willpower and turn a very common stall tactic into an advantage for you, into extra damage, is very, very good. This is a really cool ability. Just look for ways to capitalize on it. But also beware of people who are themselves immune to regen rate modification, and don't try and use this on like a Sauron. So, moving on to Synergies, we have Spider Dyad here. This gives Silk access to webbing a la Spider-Man, falls off the same basic way, and you're going to get extra potency on your bursts of damage. This might be a little bit stronger than it looks, because you are going to get the full benefit of that 5%. The bursts are still going to benefit from the Furies because they're fed through her modified attack. They're still physical damage, so you still get the benefit of the physical vulnerabilities, and you get this full 5, 10, 15, 20% boost to how much they actually do in the first place. So, pretty decent boost to the output there. And then Spider-Man gets access to her Silk Sense. If he was going to be hit by a special attack, boom, 100% chance to evade for the rest of that one. It's only good for one, but that means it's literally everybody gets one. Insert your Spider-Man memes here. Moving on to Order of the Web with Spider-Gwen and Miles Morales. This is going to give you pretty chunky degen resistance, and it's going to be up to 90% reduction if you have all three of them on the team. Very handy for your Mojos and your Dormammus. It does require you to bring 3 Science Champions with some overlap in their abilities, so there's a real cost there, but a powerful effect for it. With Apocalypse, Morningstar, Wolverine, and Weapon X, she gets extra armor rating and block proficiency. Very cool. With Agents of Atlas, this is a neat one. With Miss Marvel and Shang-Chi, all of the characters get extra critical rating for each hit in the combo meter. That's really solid for both of these, because Miss Marvel can get really high modified attack rating, and that's going to allow her to capitalize on it more often with crits. It's going to let her get through armor and resistances, and Shang-Chi gains critical damage rating for his combo anyway as the fight goes on, allowing him to access that boosted critical damage rating outside of his special 2 more often is going to dramatically spike his damage throughout the fight, especially if you have him awakened and you're also dealing damage based on damage dealt. Very, very good for him. And then Silk critting more often is going to be really solid with all of those other things that boost her her damage output. I want to talk on this for a minute because Silk is intentionally tuned to have low crit stats. I think often the player base hears that and they go, wow, they held out on the damage. They tuned her down to spite us, to take away our toys, and that's not what's happening. If we tune down a character's crit stats, we are intentionally giving ourselves room to tune up their other damage levers. It's kind of like if you're dealing with audio and you compress it, you reduce the distance between the highs and the lows, so it's safer to turn up the volume overall. That is basically exactly what we are doing when we drop crit stats. We are reducing the variance between non-crits and crits so that the overall level of output can go up. And that's what happened with Silk. But that means that if she crits more often, it's pretty darn nice, even so. So keep that in mind for that synergy. With Black Cat, you get access to these Spectre debuffs. It's non-stacking, so it's not huge, but Black Cat has access to a number of debuffs already, so she has access to Despair. This will allow her to dip her toe into Healing Reversal, which is a really cool extra ability for her to have, and just in general will slow down willpower from her Sabotage debuff or something else like that. And then Silk gets significantly stronger Spectre debuffs, which obviously combo really well with her signature ability and with the Despair Mastery to make her a monster for Healing Reversal. Silk also already has 3 incoming synergies because we teased this one a few times. So Jessica Jones, just extra health. Shocker, she gets access to damage over time debuffs. Obviously hers are ruptures because that is going to benefit from the physical vulnerabilities. It's not a ton of damage on its own, but it's going to get boosted by everything in her kit really efficiently. This also allows her to take something like Polka Dot Power because now she has access to dots. And then finally, with Moondragon, her personal bursts of damage are multiplied by a portion of her critical damage multiplier. This is not full-on critical bursts, but you will definitely notice this on her special 1 and 2. Even with her reduced critical damage, this is a pretty solid boost. And then lastly, I don't normally cover the recommended mastery sections of the spotlights because it's not helpful for all characters, but it's worth bringing up here because Silk has a lot of debuffs. I've already talked about Despair a few times. Pretty much anyone that's good with Despair is also good with Inequity because it means that you can get up to a 36% reduction in the opponent's modified attack, and that means that Silk herself is going to get roughly 50% extra effective health, because that's just how the ratios work out as far as incoming damage relative to her overall health. It's a really good survivability boost to any character with a lot of debuffs. Silk very much qualifies. Petrify is a really cool shout here, because most characters that can chain their basic combos into heavy attacks do so via a passive stun. Passive stuns do not benefit from the Petrify or Pacify masteries, but Silk does, meaning that you are actually reducing how much power your opponent is gaining from being hit by your heavy. If you run Pacify, you're also messing with their ability accuracy during that heavy. Really nice way for Silk to key into that. It's easy to read that stun debuff as being a weakness because it can be purified, and in a lot of ways it is, right? She's a science character, she has some weakness to skill champions, But in a lot of other ways, it being a debuff is actually a benefit for her. And this is a really good highlight for that. And then jumping down to the relics, she is incredible with the Hulk relic. She applies stuns all over the place, other than the parry mastery. That benefits from the relic, and she has bursts of damage. Everything she does is physical. She is a really, really good target. I like the Hulk relic already. It's incredible on Titania, on Overseer, on Hulk himself. But because of Silk's really strong synergy with Strikers, because of the fact that it basically unlocks your third Fury, allowing you to heavy cancel into a Striker, gaining one Fury, special 3 after a heavy, gaining a second Fury, and then heavy cancel into another special attack, gaining a third Fury, and just in general allows you better access to high amounts of physical vulnerability debuffs. I would put whatever highest rarity Hulk relic you have on Silk. If you don't have a Hulk relic above like 3-star, I would probably just put your highest rarity science relic on her, period. Because she is going to get a bigger benefit than most of your other science characters. It's really, really helpful to her. And that's Silk. She's a blast. Like, just in short, playing her is really, really fun. Like I said, you can chase those highs, and they are really gratifying. But even if you don't personally feel comfortable backdrafting, going for these longer combos, comboing into a heavy, into a special is a very basic skill at this point, I think, and will get decent results with her. If you equip a solid relic to her and you are able to go combo heavy into relic, combo heavy into special reliably, then you're going to get a really solid damage payout without doing anything fancy. And that whole time, you're going to have a character who doesn't give the opponent fuel for Mystic Dispersion, and who has this huge safety net for special attacks, and is probably turning off their willpower in key moments, and even reversing it. So while I think that Silk is probably going to see highest adoption in very aggro, high-skilled players for Battlegrounds, I do think there's real value here for almost anyone. And so I encourage you to check her out, give her a spin. Anyway, until the next one, thank you all so much for watching, and take care.